The morning flames licked the sky like hungry demons, tearing through the livery stable where Nora Foster had been sleeping. It was 1878 in the dusty town of Silver Creek, New Mexico Territory, and as the fire spread, Nora's screams pierced the dawn. The old wooden structure creaked and groaned under the assault of the blaze, a death wail that matched her own desperate cries. Owen Zachary leapt from his horse at the edge of town, having spotted the smoke from miles away. His journey to Silver Creek hadn't included plans for heroism, but the sound of a woman's voice amid the roaring inferno changed everything. Without hesitation, he wrapped his bandana around his face and charged through the wall of heat. "Hold on." He shouted, his voice barely audible above the crackling timber. "I'm coming for you." Inside, he found her trapped beneath a fallen beam, the flames closing in from all sides. Her dress was already burning at the edges, her pale skin reddening with blisters. With strength born of desperation, Owen lifted the beam and gathered her limp form into his arms, racing back toward the exit as the roof began to collapse behind them. They tumbled into the street amid a shower of sparks and ash, the townspeople rushing forward with blankets and water. But Owen saw their faces fall as they beheld the woman in his arms, her once beautiful features now ravaged by fire, her golden hair singed away, her skin a grotesque map of burns and blisters. "Get Doc Reynolds," someone shouted, but the murmurs that followed were grim. Poor girl. Better if she hadn't been saved at all. No man will ever look at her again. Owen heard these whispers as he cradled her head, but when her eyes fluttered open a startling, vibrant green against her reddened skin, something inside him shifted. In those eyes, he saw a fierce will to live that matched his own. "You're going to be all right," he promised, though he had no right to make such a vow. "I've got you now." Her cracked lips moved slightly, forming a single word before she slipped into unconsciousness. "Why?" It was a question Owen couldn't answer as Doc Reynolds arrived and took charge, directing them to carry her to his office. But as he reluctantly released her to the doctor's care, Owen knew one thing with absolute certainty: he wasn't going anywhere until he saw those green eyes again. The doctor's office was small but neat, smelling of carbolic acid and herbs. Doc Reynolds worked quickly, his weathered hands gentle as he cleaned Nora's burns and applied salves. "She'll need constant care," he told Owen, who had refused to leave despite the doctor's protests. "The risk of infection is high and the pain." He shook his head. "It'll be unbearable when she wakes." "I'll help," Owen said simply, removing his hat and setting it aside. The dust of the trail still clung to his clothes, but he ignored his own discomfort as he pulled up a chair beside the examination table. "You don't even know her," Doc Reynolds observed, studying the tall cowboy with curious eyes. "I know she's fighting to live," Owen replied. "That's enough for now." For 3 days, Nora drifted in and out of consciousness, her periods of wakefulness marked by agonized moans that tore at Owen's heart. He learned her name from the townspeople: Nora Foster, the schoolteacher who had arrived in Silver Creek just 6 months earlier. She had been sleeping in the livery because the boarding house had been full, a temporary arrangement until more suitable accommodations could be found. No one knew much more about her. She kept to herself, they said, though she was unfailingly kind to her pupils. She had no family that anyone was aware of, no suitors or close friends. The realization that she was so alone in the world only strengthened Owen's resolve to stay. On the 4th day, she opened her eyes and truly saw him for the first time. "You're still here," she whispered, her voice rough from the smoke and screaming. "I am," Owen confirmed, leaning forward to offer her a sip of water. "Name's Owen Zachary. I pulled you from the fire." "I remember," she said, wincing as she tried to shift her position. "Thank you for saving me, Mr. Zachary." "Owen," he corrected gently, "and you're Nora Foster, the school teacher." A shadow crossed her face then, and she turned away from him as best she could. She murmured. "I was the school teacher." "You still are," he insisted. "Once you're healed." Her laugh was bitter, ending in a pained cough. "I know what fire does, Mr. Zachary. I know what I must look like." Owen hesitated, then reached for the small hand mirror on the doctor's desk. "Do you want to see?" Fear flashed in her eyes, quickly replaced by resignation. "Yes," I need to know what I'm facing. With careful movements, he held the mirror where she could see her reflection. Her once smooth skin was now a patchwork of angry red burns and blisters, some already beginning to scar. Her eyebrows were gone, her lips swollen and cracked. The thick blonde hair that had fallen to her waist was now reduced to uneven patches. Tears welled in her eyes but did not fall. Instead, she took a deep breath and nodded once. "Thank you for your honesty." Owen set the mirror aside. "The doc says some of it will heal better than it looks now, but even if it doesn't." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's just skin, Miss Foster. It's not who you are." She studied him with those remarkable green eyes, searching for mockery or pity but finding neither. "You're a strange man, Owen Zachary." "I've been called worse," he replied with a small smile. "Now the doc left some broth for when you woke up. Think you could manage a few spoonfuls," and so began a routine. Each day, Owen would help Doc Reynolds change Nora's bandages, would feed her when her hands shook too badly to hold a spoon, would read to her from the doctor's small collection of books when the pain kept her from sleep. He slept on a cot in the corner of the office, refusing offers of accommodation at the hotel. "Why are you doing this?" Nora asked him one evening, 2 weeks after the fire. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Owen set aside the book. He'd been reading a dog-eared copy of Great Expectations and considered her question. "Maybe I'm just passing through and have nothing better to do," he suggested, but the twinkle in his blue eyes betrayed his teasing. "You've been passing through for 2 weeks now," she pointed out. "Most men would have moved on by now." "I'm not most men," he replied simply. Then, more seriously, "I believe things happen for a reason, Miss Foster. I was meant to be here that morning, meant to hear your cry for help." "So it's divine intervention. God sent you to save the schoolmarm." "Maybe," he conceded. "Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe I recognized something in you that first day, a spirit that refused to be broken, even by fire. That's not something you walk away from easily." Nora fell silent, her eyes drifting to the window where the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "My spirit feels plenty broken, Mr. Zachary." "Owen," he reminded her gently, "and broken things can be mended." The following day, Nora took her first steps since the fire. Owen supported her weight as she shuffled painfully across the room, her breath coming in short gasps, her legs trembling with the effort. But there was determination in the set of her jaw, and when she completed the journey from the bed to the window, the smile she gave him was radiant despite her ravaged features. "I did it," she whispered, exhaustion evident in her voice but pride shining through. "You did," he agreed, his arm steady around her waist, "and tomorrow you'll go a little further." As the weeks passed, Nora's physical strength returned gradually. The worst of her burns began to heal, though it was clear that the scars would remain. Her hair started to grow back, soft and downy as a child's, but her spirit remained guarded, her eyes wary whenever visitors came to inquire after her health. "They're just being polite," she told Owen after the mayor's wife had departed, leaving behind a basket of preserves and a forced smile. "They don't really want to see me like this." "Then they're fools," Owen declared, setting the basket on the table with more force than necessary. "And their opinion isn't worth the dust on your shoes." Nora's lips quirked in a small smile. "Careful, Mr. Zachary. I might start to think you like me." "Owen," he corrected for what felt like the 100th time. "And what if I do?" The question hung in the air between them, unexpected and profound. Nora looked away first, her scarred hands fidgeting with the edge of her blanket. "Then I'd say you need spectacles," she finally replied, her attempt at humor falling flat. "Or perhaps your time in the desert sun has addled your brain." Owen moved to sit beside her on the edge of the bed, his weathered hand covering hers, stilling her nervous movements. "My vision is just fine," he said quietly. "And my mind is clear as a mountain stream. I see you, Nora Foster. Not just the burns, not just the scars. I see your courage when you take each painful step. I see your kindness when you ask after Doc Reynolds' day before mentioning your own discomfort. I see the way you still light up when I read to you about far-off places and grand adventures." Tears spilled onto Nora's cheeks, and she made no attempt to hide them. "You don't know what you're saying. You can't possibly want." "I know exactly what I'm saying," he interrupted gently. But I'm not asking for anything right now. I'm just telling you what I see because I think you've forgotten how to see it yourself." Before she could respond, Doc Reynolds entered with a tray of fresh bandages, and the moment passed. But something had shifted between them. A door cracked open that neither could fully close again. As the summer heat gave way to the cooler days of early autumn, Nora's recovery progressed to the point where she could leave the doctor's office for short walks. At first, she ventured out only after dark, unwilling to face the stares and whispers of the townspeople. But Owen coaxed her into the sunlight, his steady presence beside her a shield against the world's judgment. "People will look," he acknowledged as they prepared for their first daytime excursion, "but they'll get used to it, and so will you." "I'm not sure I ever will," Nora admitted, adjusting the wide-brimmed bonnet she wore to protect her sensitive skin from the sun. "Every time I catch my reflection, it's like seeing a stranger." Owen stood before her, his tall frame blocking the mirror she'd been scrutinizing. "Then maybe you need to get to know her better. This new Nora has survived something that would have broken many others. She deserves your respect, at least." The walk was as difficult as Nora had feared. Children stared openly, one small boy pointing before his mother hurriedly shushed him. Women whispered behind their hands, and men looked away awkwardly when she passed. But Owen's hand remained firm at her elbow, his stride matching her slower pace, his conversation continuing as if they were merely out for a pleasant stroll. By the time they returned to the doctor's office, Nora was trembling with exhaustion and emotion. "I can't do this," she said, sinking into a chair. "I can't live here with everyone looking at me like I'm some sort of monster." "You can," Owen countered, kneeling before her. "And you will, but not here." She looked up, confusion evident in her expression. "What do you mean?" "I have a small ranch about 3 days' ride from here, just outside of Albuquerque. It's not much a decent house, some good grazing land, a few head of cattle. It's quiet, peaceful." He took a deep breath. "Come with me." Nora stared at him, stunned. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," he replied. "You need somewhere to heal not just your body, but your heart too. Somewhere you can find yourself again without the weight of all these eyes watching and judging. And you think that place is with you, at your ranch?" Her voice held disbelief, but there was something else too, a flicker of hope she couldn't quite suppress. "I think it could be, yes." Owen's gaze was steady, his voice calm. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, Nora. I have a small cabin on the property where I could stay. You'd have the main house to yourself. All I'm offering is a fresh start, away from the memories of the fire and the people who can't see past your scars." "Why would you do this?" she whispered. "You've already done more than anyone could expect." Owen's smile was gentle. "Because in all my years of wandering, I've never met anyone I wanted to build something with. Until now." The sincerity in his voice left her speechless. She searched his face for any sign of pity or obligation, but found only warmth and a quiet certainty that tugged at something deep within her. "I need time to think," she finally said. "Take all the time you need," he replied, rising to his feet. "I'll be here." That night, sleep eluded Nora. She lay awake, contemplating Owen's offer and the implications it carried. She had come to Silver Creek, seeking independence, after years of living under her uncle's oppressive roof in Boston. The teaching position had been her chance to build a life on her own terms, to establish herself as something more than a burdensome relation or a potential bride. The fire had destroyed those dreams as surely as it had marked her body. No parent would want their child taught by a woman whose appearance frightened them. No respectable establishment would hire her. Her options had narrowed to accepting charity or returning east in disgrace. And now there was Owen, offering a third path, one that both terrified and tempted her. She barely knew him, this quiet cowboy with the steady hands and unwavering gaze. Yet in the weeks since the fire, he had shown her more kindness and respect than she had received in years. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself to build a new life from the ashes of the old? Morning found her tired but resolved. When Owen arrived with breakfast, she met his questioning look with a small nod. "Yes," she said simply. "I'll go with you to Albuquerque." The relief and joy that spread across his face was worth any uncertainty she still harbored. "You won't regret it," he promised, squeezing her hand gently. We'll leave as soon as Doc Reynolds says you're strong enough for the journey. Doc Reynolds, when consulted, was cautiously supportive of the plan. The fresh air and open spaces might do you good, he conceded. But the journey won't be easy. You'll need to stop frequently to rest, and you'll have to be vigilant about keeping your healing skin protected from the sun and dust. I'll make sure she's taken care of, Owen assured him. We'll take it slow, stay at way stations when we can. And what exactly are your intentions toward Miss Foster? The doctor asked bluntly, his protective instinct showing. He had come to care for Nora during her long recovery, viewing her almost as a daughter. Honorable, Owen replied without hesitation. She'll have her own space, her own independence. I'm offering her a place to heal, not making demands. The doctor studied him for a long moment before nodding. I believe you, but remember, those burns aren't just physical. The kind of trauma she's experienced leaves deeper scars than the ones we can see. I know, Owen said quietly. I've got a few of those myself. Preparations for the journey took another week. Owen purchased a sturdy wagon with a canvas cover to shield Nora from the elements, padded the seat with extra blankets for comfort, and stocked up on supplies. Doc Reynolds provided ointments and bandages for Nora's ongoing care, along with laudanum for the inevitable pain the journey would cause. The night before their departure, Nora sat on the edge of her bed, folding the few belongings that had survived the fire: a Bible, 2 dresses hastily sewn by the local seamstress, a silver hairbrush that had been a gift from her mother. Everything else she owned had been reduced to ash. Not much to show for 24 years of life, she murmured to herself. It's not things that make a life. Owen's voice came from the doorway. He held a package wrapped in brown paper. It's what you carry inside. She looked up with a small smile. That sounds suspiciously like wisdom, Mr. Zachary. Owen, he corrected automatically, crossing the room to sit beside her. And even fools stumble upon wisdom occasionally. He held out the package. I brought you something for the journey. Curious, Nora unwrapped the paper to reveal a soft leather-bound journal and a set of pencils. She ran her fingers over the smooth cover, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. I noticed you like to write, he explained. You're always making notes in the margins of the books I bring you. Thought you might want to record your thoughts during the journey. Thank you, she said softly. It's perfect. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Are you afraid? Owen finally asked. About tomorrow. Nora considered the question, appreciating that he didn't try to dismiss her fears. Yes, she admitted. But not of the journey itself. I'm afraid of what comes after, of starting over again when I'm not even sure who I am anymore. Owen nodded, understanding in his eyes. The woman I first saw in that burning stable, she was a fighter. The woman who takes painful steps every day because she refuses to give up. She's brave beyond measure. The woman who still finds beauty in words and stories, despite everything. She's got a soul that shines through any scars. His voice lowered. That's who you are, Nora Foster. The rest is just details we'll figure out along the way. His words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, offering comfort and courage for the journey ahead. For the first time since the fire, Nora allowed herself to believe that perhaps there was still a future worth fighting for. Dawn broke clear and cool the next morning as they prepared to depart. Doc Reynolds came to see them off, pressing a jar of special salve into Nora's hands. For the itching when the scars start to heal properly, he explained, and you remember how to change the bandages. Yes, doctor, she assured him, touched by his concern. I'll be careful, see that you are. He turned to Owen, his expression stern. And you get her safely to that ranch of yours, you hear? No rushing, no shortcuts through rough country. You have my word, Owen promised, extending his hand. The 2 men shook, an understanding passing between them. The wagon was loaded, the horses harnessed and ready. Owen helped Nora climb up to the padded seat, arranging a light blanket over her lap despite the mild weather. Her skin was still sensitive to temperature changes, quick to react to heat or cold. Comfortable? He asked, studying her face for any sign of pain. As I'll ever be, she replied with a small smile. Let's not delay any longer. I'm ready. With a final wave to Doc Reynolds and the small gathering of townspeople who had come to witness their departure, Owen clicked to the horses and the wagon rolled forward, leaving Silver Creek behind. The journey to Albuquerque proved every bit as challenging as Doc Reynolds had warned. The rutted trails jostled the wagon mercilessly, sending spikes of pain through Nora's healing body. The dust coated her sensitive skin despite the canvas cover, and the heat of the day left her dizzy and weak. But there were unexpected joys too. Camping beneath the vast canopy of stars, she felt a freedom she had never known before. Owen would build a small fire, prepare a simple meal, and then sit beside her, pointing out constellations and sharing stories of his own travels across the Western Territories. She learned that he had been born in St. Louis to a shopkeeper and his wife, but had lost them both to cholera when he was 15. With no other family, he had headed west, working as a ranch hand, a scout, a freight driver, anything that would keep him moving. "Why did you finally settle in New Mexico?" she asked on their second night, wrapped in blankets against the desert chill. Owen poked at the fire, considering his answer. "I came through Albuquerque about 5 years ago, driving cattle up from Texas. There was something about the land there, the way the mountains rise up in the distance, the clarity of the light." He smiled at the memory. "I knew I'd found the place I wanted to call home, and you've been there ever since." "Not entirely." He added another stick to the fire. "I bought the land, built the house, started a small herd. But I still take jobs that require travel, delivering mail to remote settlements, guiding the occasional survey party, that sort of thing. That's what brought me to Silver Creek. I was on my way back from delivering dispatches to Fort Union." Nora absorbed this information, building a clearer picture of the man who had so unexpectedly become her protector and friend. "Do you ever get lonely, out there on your ranch by yourself?" Owen's eyes met hers across the flickering flames. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I've always been comfortable with my own company. And I have good neighbors, not close enough to be a bother, but near enough if I need help." He paused. "Though I will say, these past weeks, having someone to talk to at the end of the day has been nice." The simple honesty of his statement touched her deeply. Here was a man who had built a life of solitude and independence, yet had willingly disrupted it to care for a stranger. A man who asked for nothing in return, who seemed content simply to be in her company. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything," he nodded, understanding that her gratitude encompassed far more than just the rescue or the journey. "Get some rest," he told her gently. "We've got another long day tomorrow." On the third day, the trail became steeper as they approached the outskirts of Albuquerque. The surrounding landscape changed, the flat desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with piñon pines and juniper. In the distance, the Sandia Mountains rose majestically against the clear blue sky. "Almost there," Owen announced as the wagon crested a rise in the late afternoon. "See that stand of cottonwoods in the valley? That's the edge of my property. The house is just beyond." Nora leaned forward, her heart beating faster as she caught her first glimpse of what was to be her new home. The ranch house was modest but well built, constructed of adobe with a wooden porch wrapping around two sides. A small barn stood nearby, along with a corral where several horses grazed peacefully. A creek wound through the property, its banks lined with the cottonwoods Owen had pointed out. "It's beautiful," she breathed, genuinely impressed. She had half expected a rough cabin, not this thoughtfully established homestead. "It's not much compared to what you probably knew back east," Owen said, misinterpreting her surprise. "But it's solid and warm in the winter, cool in the summer." "It's perfect," she assured him. "Truly." As they approached, a dog came bounding from the direction of the house, a large, shaggy creature with one ear standing up and the other flopped over. "That's Rusty," Owen explained with a grin. "Best cattle dog in the territory, though he thinks he's a lapdog when evening comes." The dog circled the wagon excitedly, barking a welcome to his returning master. When they pulled up in front of the house, a man emerged from the barn, tall and lean, with graying hair and a weathered face. "That's Samuel," Owen said. "He watches over the place when I'm away, lives in the small cabin we talked about, the one where I'll be staying now." Samuel approached the wagon, his curious gaze taking in Nora's veiled figure. "Welcome back, Owen," he called. Started to think you might have found better company than an old cowhand and a half-wit dog. Found different company, not better, Owen replied easily, jumping down from the wagon. The two men clasped hands warmly. Samuel, this is Miss Nora Foster. She'll be staying in the main house for a while. Samuel removed his hat, nodding politely to Nora. If he was surprised by the arrangement or curious about the veil that obscured her features, he didn't show it. Pleased to meet you, Miss Foster. Hope you'll be comfortable here. Thank you, Mr. Samuel, she replied, appreciating his matter-of-fact courtesy. Just Samuel, madam, no Mr. needed, he turned to Owen. Everything's in order. Got a stew going when I saw the dust from your wagon. Figured you'd be hungry after the trail. You figured right, Owen confirmed. Let's get Miss Foster settled first, though. With gentle hands, he helped Nora down from the wagon, supporting her when her legs trembled from the long hours of sitting. Samuel stepped forward to assist without being asked, and between the two men, Nora made her way up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was simple but comfortable, a large main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a cast-iron stove, a wooden table with 4 chairs. 2 doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. Your room is through there, Owen indicated one of the doors. I aired it out this morning before I left to get you, Samuel added. Put fresh linens on the bed, too. Thank you, Nora said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of these preparations. I appreciate the trouble you've gone to. No trouble, Samuel assured her. Any friend of Owen's is welcome here, friend. The word settled around Nora like a comfortable shawl. Yes, despite the unusual circumstances of their meeting, she and Owen had become friends. It was a solid foundation for whatever might come next. Why don't you rest a bit before supper? Owen suggested, noting the fatigue evident in the droop of her shoulders. I'll bring in your things. Too tired to argue, Nora allowed herself to be led to the bedroom. It was a pleasant space with whitewashed walls, a colorful woven rug on the floor, and a large bed with a handmade quilt. A dresser stood against one wall, a washstand against another. A window overlooked the creek and the mountains beyond. It's lovely, she told Owen, who hovered in the doorway. Thank you. I'll let you get settled, he said, clearly relieved that she approved of the accommodations. Call if you need anything. Left alone, Nora removed her bonnet and veil, sighing with relief as the cool air touched her sensitive skin. She crossed to the window, gazing out at the view that would now greet her each morning. The setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light, transforming the ordinary into something magical. For the first time since the fire, she felt a spark of hope ignite within her. Perhaps here, in this peaceful place with this extraordinary man, she could begin to rebuild not just her life, but herself. Supper that evening was a surprisingly cheerful affair. Samuel proved to be an excellent cook, and his stew rich with beef, potatoes, and wild onions was the most satisfying meal Nora had eaten in weeks. Owen had insisted she not feel obligated to wear her veil at the table, assuring her that Samuel had seen far worse in his years of ranch work and military service. Lost 2 fingers to frostbite during the war, Samuel confirmed, holding up his left hand to display the missing digits. And my brother came back with half his face gone from a cannon blast. Scars are just proof you survived something others didn't. His matter-of-fact attitude was oddly comforting, allowing Nora to relax and enjoy the meal without the constant self-consciousness that had plagued her in Silver Creek. As the days turned into weeks, Nora gradually settled into a routine at the ranch. Each morning she would wake with the sun, dress carefully to protect her healing skin, and join Owen for breakfast. He would outline his plans for the day, mending fences, tending the cattle, repairing equipment while she listened, increasingly interested in the workings of the ranch. After breakfast, Owen would head out to his chores, leaving Nora to spend her mornings as she pleased. At first she kept to the house, reading books from Owen's small but surprisingly diverse library or writing in the journal he had given her. But as her strength returned, she began to venture outside, exploring the immediate surroundings of the house and eventually walking as far as the creek. It was during one of these walks, about a month after their arrival, that Owen found her sitting on a flat rock by the water, her face tilted up to catch the autumn sunlight. "You're not wearing your bonnet," he observed, approaching quietly so as not to startle her. Nora touched her scarred cheek self-consciously. "The sun feels good on my skin." Doc Reynolds said exposure to air and light would help the healing process as long as I don't overdo it. Owen settled beside her on the rock, his larger frame making her acutely aware of his physical presence. "The redness is fading," he noted, "and your hair's growing back nicely." She ran a hand over the short, downy growth that now covered her scalp. "It's coming in darker than before," she said. "I was golden blonde as a child, now it seems to be more of a light brown." "It suits you," he said simply. "Brings out the green in your eyes." She glanced at him, surprised by the compliment. He met her gaze steadily, without a trace of the pity or revulsion she had grown accustomed to seeing in others' eyes. "Why don't you ever look away?" she asked suddenly. "When you look at me, I mean. Most people can't bear to look directly at me for more than a few seconds." Owen considered her question seriously. "I suppose because I don't see what they see," he finally replied. "The first time I saw you really saw you, not just the shape of you in that burning building, was when you opened your eyes after I carried you out. You were in terrible pain, your skin was blistering, but there was such life in those eyes." He paused. "That's what I see when I look at you now." Not the scars, but the life behind them. Nora felt tears gathering, but for once they weren't tears of grief or bitterness. "You're a remarkable man, Owen Zachary." He shook his head, a slight flush coloring his tan cheeks. "Not remarkable, just old enough to have learned what matters." He stood, extending a hand to help her up. "Speaking of which, I came to find you because Samuel's leaving tomorrow, heading south to visit his sister for the winter." "Oh," Nora said, suddenly realizing what this meant. With Samuel gone, she and Owen would be alone at the ranch without the buffer of a third person. "I see. I'll still stay in the cabin," Owen assured her, correctly interpreting her concern. "Nothing changes in that regard, but I wanted you to know so you could say your goodbyes." She nodded, grateful for his sensitivity. In the weeks since their arrival, she had grown fond of the older man, whose quiet presence and practical wisdom reminded her of the grandfather she had barely known. "Will he be back in the spring?" she asked as they walked back toward the house. "Usually is," Owen confirmed. "Though his sister's been trying to convince him to move in with her permanently, says a man his age shouldn't be living alone in the wilderness." "And what does Samuel say to that?" Owen's lips quirked in a smile. "Says he'd rather wrestle a grizzly than live under the same roof as his bossy little sister." Nora laughed, the sound surprising both of them. It was the first time she had truly laughed since the fire, and the realization brought a momentary shadow to her eyes. "What is it?" Owen asked, noting the change in her expression. "I just realized. I'm starting to feel like myself again," she admitted, "and I'm not sure whether to be grateful or afraid." "Why would you be afraid?" she hesitated, trying to articulate the complex emotions swirling within her. "Because the woman I was before the fire, she's gone, isn't she? The school teacher with dreams of independence and adventure. The woman who thought her looks were her greatest asset." She touched her scarred face. "I can't go back to being her, and I don't yet know who this new person is." Owen stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "The core of who you are didn't burn in that fire, Nora. Your intelligence, your courage, your kind heart, those things are still there. Maybe the packaging is different, but the gift inside is the same." His words washed over her like a healing balm, addressing fears she hadn't even fully acknowledged to herself. This was what made Owen different from everyone else she had ever known, his ability to see beyond surfaces to the truth beneath. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me." "Always," he promised, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a deepening of the connection that had been growing since that first moment in Silver Creek. With Samuel's departure, the rhythm of life at the ranch changed subtly. Owen invited Nora to join him for evening meals at the main house, a practical arrangement that allowed them to share cooking duties and conserve resources. These dinners became a cherished ritual, a time for conversation that ranged from philosophical discussions to mundane matters of ranch management. Gradually, Nora began to take on more responsibilities around the house and yard. She tended a small herb garden Samuel had started, gathered eggs from the handful of chickens Owen kept, and even learned to bake bread in the temperamental oven. "You don't have to earn your keep, you know," Owen told her one evening as she set a loaf of fresh bread on the table. "You're welcome here regardless." "I know," she replied, "but I want to contribute, being useful. It helps me remember who I am." He nodded, understanding. "Well, in that case, I should warn you that I've been spoiled by your cooking. I might not let you leave when spring comes." The casual reference to her eventual departure caught Nora off guard. She had been living day to day, not allowing herself to think too far ahead. The realization that this arrangement was temporary, that at some point she would need to decide what came next, sent a pang of anxiety through her. Owen, noticing her expression, set down his knife. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to presume. This is your home for as long as you want it to be. No deadlines, no expectations." "It's all right," she assured him, recovering her composure. "I just hadn't thought about it." "About leaving? And you don't need to," he said firmly. "Not until you're ready." The conversation moved on to other topics, but the question lingered in Nora's mind. Where would she go when she was fully healed? What kind of life could a woman with her scars build in a world that valued beauty and conformity? Winter descended on the ranch, bringing shorter days and long, cold nights. Owen worked tirelessly to ensure they were prepared, splitting extra firewood, securing the barn and outbuildings against the wind, bringing the cattle down from the higher pastures to the sheltered valley. Nora watched him with growing admiration. He approached each task with quiet competence, never complaining about the cold or the physical demands of ranch work. In the evenings, he would return to the house with his cheeks ruddy from the wind, his hands chapped from work, but always with a smile for her. One particularly bitter evening in December, a blizzard howled around the ranch house, the wind finding every crack and crevice despite Owen's careful preparations. Nora added another log to the fireplace, grateful for the substantial pile of wood Owen had stacked on the porch that morning. "He should have been back by now," she murmured to herself, peering anxiously through the frosted window. Owen had gone to check on the cattle hours ago, promising to return before dark. But darkness had fallen swiftly, brought on by the storm, and there was still no sign of him. As the minutes stretched into hours, Nora's worry grew. She paced the floor, made coffee that grew cold untouched, and jumped at every sound that might herald his return. When a particularly violent gust rattled the windows, she made a decision. Pulling on the heavy coat Owen had given her for the winter months, she wrapped a scarf around the lower half of her face, as much to protect her still sensitive skin from the cold as to shield herself from the biting wind. With a lantern in one hand and a rope tied around her waist, the other end secured to the porch railing, a precaution against getting lost in the whiteout conditions, she ventured outside. "Owen," she called, her voice immediately swallowed by the howling wind. "Owen, where are you?" The snow was knee-deep and still falling heavily, making each step a struggle. Nora fought her way toward the barn, reasoning that Owen might have sought shelter there if he'd made it back to the ranch compound. She had almost reached the barn when she heard a faint call that might have been her name. Turning toward the sound, she raised the lantern higher. "Owen, is that you?" A dark shape materialized from the swirling snow, a man leading a horse, both moving slowly against the force of the storm. "Nora," Owen's voice was incredulous. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" Relief made her knees weak, but she pushed forward to meet him. "Looking for you. You said you'd be back before dark." He reached her side, his face barely visible beneath the rim of his snow-covered hat. The north fence came down, had to round up the strays before they wandered too far, lost track of time. He glanced at the rope around her waist, understanding dawning. "You came out in this storm to find me." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Of course I did, I was worried." Something shifted in his expression, then surprise giving way to a warmth that had nothing to do with physical comfort. "Let's get inside," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "This is no place for either of us." Together they made their way to the barn, where Owen quickly unsaddled his exhausted horse and rubbed the animal down with dry straw. Then, with Nora's rope as their guide, they battled through the storm to the welcoming light of the ranch house. Inside, they shed their snow-covered outer garments, both shivering violently from the extreme cold. "You're half frozen," Nora observed, noting the blue tinge to Owen's lips and the way his hands trembled. "Sit by the fire. I'll make coffee." But as she turned toward the kitchen, Owen caught her arm. "Nora," he said, his voice low and intense. "What you did tonight, coming out in that blizzard, no one's ever," he broke off, seemingly unable to find the words, "cared enough to risk a little snow," she suggested softly. "Cared at all," he corrected. "I've been on my own since I was 15. There's never been anyone waiting, anyone who would notice if I didn't come home." The simple honesty of his statement pierced her heart. This strong, capable man who had saved her life and given her a home had been alone for so long that the mere fact of someone caring for his welfare was overwhelming to him. "Well, there is now," she told him firmly. "So you'd better start taking better care of yourself, Owen Zachary, because I don't fancy going out in any more blizzards to rescue you." A slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Yes, madam," he said, with a touch of his usual humor. "Though from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm the one who rescued you." "We rescued each other," she corrected, and in that moment they both knew it was true. The blizzard marked a turning point in their relationship. The careful distance Owen had maintained sleeping in the cabin, limiting physical contact to the occasional supportive hand, gave way to a new closeness. He began spending evenings in the main house rather than returning to the cabin after dinner, the two of them sitting before the fire reading or talking until the logs burned low. One such evening in late January, Nora looked up from her book to find Owen watching her, his expression thoughtful. "What is it?" she asked, self-consciously touching her face. Though she had grown more comfortable in his presence, old habits died hard. "I was just thinking," he replied, setting aside the bridle he had been mending. "Would you like to learn to ride?" The question caught her off guard. "Ride? A horse, you mean?" "No, a buffalo," he teased gently. "Yes, a horse. I've got a mare that would be perfect for you, steady, even-tempered, and the doctor said you should continue to build your strength." Nora considered the idea. Before the fire, she would never have contemplated such an activity. Young ladies of her background rode side-saddle in parks, not astride across open country. But she wasn't that person anymore, was she? "I'd like that," she decided. "Though I've never ridden before, not properly." "We'll start slow," Owen assured her. "Just around the corral at first, until you're comfortable. Then maybe short rides along the creek when the weather improves." The prospect of a new skill to master, a new way to experience the freedom of the ranch, filled Nora with unexpected excitement. "When can we begin?" Owen's smile was warm with approval. "Tomorrow, if the weather holds, I'll introduce you to Daisy." True to his word, the next day found them in the corral, where a dun-colored mare waited patiently, already saddled and bridled. "This is Daisy," Owen said, stroking the horse's nose affectionately. "Daisy, this is Nora. Be gentle with her, she's new to this." Nora approached cautiously, extending her hand as Owen had shown her. The mare sniffed her fingers, then nudged her palm gently. "She likes you," Owen observed. "That's a good start." He spent the next hour teaching Nora the basics: how to approach a horse safely, how to mount and dismount, how to hold the reins properly. His hands were steady and sure as they guided hers, his voice calm and encouraging. "You're a natural," he told her as she completed her third circuit of the corral without mishap. "Most beginners are too tense, but you've got a good seat." Nora laughed, flushed with success and the simple joy of the activity. "I think Daisy deserves most of the credit. She's very patient with me." "She knows a kindred spirit when she meets one," Owen replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Both of you gentle but strong." The compliment warmed her from within, adding to the glow of accomplishment she already felt. This was yet another small victory, another step toward reclaiming her life. As winter gave way to spring, these riding lessons became a regular part of their routine. Nora's confidence grew with each session, until she was comfortable enough to venture beyond the corral for short rides along the creek with Owen at her side. During one such ride in early April, they stopped to rest in a meadow where wildflowers had begun to carpet the ground with splashes of color. Nora dismounted carefully, still mindful of the occasional pain that shot through her healing body when she moved too quickly. "It's beautiful here," she said, breathing deeply of the flower-scented air. "I never imagined New Mexico would be so green." "The spring rains make all the difference," Owen replied, securing the horses before joining her in the middle of the meadow. "By summer, it'll be brown again, except along the creek." Nora knelt to examine a cluster of small blue flowers, their delicate petals a striking contrast to the tough, leathery leaves. "What are these called? Forget-me-nots," Owen said, crouching beside her. "Legend says a knight was walking with his lady by a river. He picked these flowers for her, but fell into the water. As he was swept away, he tossed the flowers to her and called out, 'Forget-me-not.'" Nora glanced at him, surprised. "I didn't take you for a man who knew flower legends." A slight flush colored his tan cheeks. "My mother loved gardens. She taught me the names of every flower she grew." It was rare for Owen to mention his parents, and Nora treasured these small glimpses into his past. "She sounds like a wonderful woman." "She was," he agreed softly. Then, changing the subject, "How are you feeling? This is the longest ride you've taken so far." Nora considered the question honestly, "A bit sore, but in a good way, like I've accomplished something." "You have," he assured her. 6 months ago, you could barely walk across a room. Now you're riding across meadows. 6 months. Had it really been that long since the fire? Nora counted back in her mind October, November, December, January, February, March, April. Yes, almost exactly 6 months since the morning flames had consumed her old life and set her on the path to this new one. "I've been here half a year," she said, the realization striking her suddenly. "It doesn't seem possible." Owen nodded, his expression turning serious. "Time has a way of passing differently out here. Days feel long, but months go by in a blink." He paused. "Have you thought about what you want to do next? Now that you're stronger," the question hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken implications. Nora plucked one of the forget-me-nots, twirling it between her fingers as she formulated her answer. "I've been thinking about it," she admitted. "About whether I should try to find work in Albuquerque, perhaps as a private tutor or a shopkeeper's assistant. Something that wouldn't require me to face too many people at once." Owen's face remained carefully neutral, but she saw the slight tightening of his jaw. "And is that what you want, to go to town?" Nora met his gaze directly. "What I want," she said slowly, "is to stay here with you." "But I can't keep living off your charity forever, Owen." "Charity," he almost spat the word. "Is that what you think this is?" "What else would you call it?" she challenged gently. "You took in a stranger with nothing to offer, gave her a home, food, clothing, companionship," he interrupted. "Conversation, purpose." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions of living without really engaging with the world. You changed that, Nora. You made this place a home, not just a house where I sometimes sleep between jobs." His vehemence surprised her, as did the depth of emotion behind his words. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said softly. "Well, now you do." He stood abruptly, pacing a few steps away before turning back to face her. "I don't want you to go to town and find work. I want you to stay here with me, not as a charity case, not as a guest, but as—" He faltered, seeming to struggle with finding the right words. "As what, Owen?" she prompted, her heart beating faster. "As my partner," he finally said. "My wife, if you'll have me." The world seemed to still around them, the only sound the gentle rustle of the breeze through the meadow grass. Nora stared up at him, searching his face for any sign of pity or obligation, but all she saw was earnest hope and a vulnerability that matched her own. "Why?" she asked, needing to be certain. "Why would you want to marry me?" Owen knelt before her again, his eyes level with hers. "Because I love you," he said simply. "I think I started falling in love with you that first day in Silver Creek when you asked why I'd saved you. I knew then that you were different, that you saw the world clearly, without illusion. And every day since, I've discovered more reasons to love you, your courage, your kindness, your strength. But my scars are part of you," he finished for her. "Just like my stubbornness is part of me, and my tendency to forget to take off my boots at the door, and all the other things that make us who we are." He took her hands in his. "I don't love you despite your scars, Nora. I love all of you, including the parts that remind me of how fiercely you fought to live." Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have for months, but I was afraid to admit it, even to myself. I couldn't believe that someone like you could want someone like me." "Then believe it now," he urged, bringing her hands to his lips. "Marry me, Nora Foster. Make this ranch truly your home." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Owen's face broke into a radiant smile, and then he was pulling her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a gentle, reverent kiss. When they finally broke apart, Nora was trembling not with pain or fear, but with a happiness so intense it was almost overwhelming. "When?" she asked, suddenly practical despite her emotion. "When should we marry?" Owen laughed, the sound joyous and carefree. "Tomorrow, if I could arrange it, but realistically, we'd need to go into town, find a preacher." He considered for a moment. "Would 2 weeks be enough time?" "That would give us a chance to make arrangements, perhaps order a proper dress for you if you'd like." The thought of going into town, of facing the stares and whispers of strangers, sent a momentary flicker of anxiety through Nora. But with Owen beside her, she found the prospect more manageable than it once would have been. 2 weeks sounds perfect," she agreed. "Though I don't need anything fancy for the ceremony, just you." His smile softened. "Just the same, I want it to be special." "You deserve a proper wedding, Nora, not just a hasty visit to a justice of the peace." As they rode back to the ranch, plans forming between them, Nora felt as though she were floating above the saddle. After months of uncertainty, of questioning her place in the world and her value as a woman, she had found answers in the steadfast love of this quiet, remarkable man. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Owen rode into Albuquerque to make arrangements with the local minister and to purchase supplies for the small celebration they had planned. Nora, determined to contribute, threw herself into preparing the ranch house for its new status as their shared home. She sewed curtains for the windows from fabric Owen brought from town, planted flowers along the path to the front door, and rearranged furniture to create a more harmonious living space. Each task was an act of claiming, of transforming a place where she had been a guest into one where she belonged. 3 days before the wedding, a wagon arrived from town, bearing not only the supplies Owen had ordered, but also an unexpected gift, a dress package from the finest dressmaker in Albuquerque, along with a note. "I know you said you didn't need anything special," Owen explained as Nora stared at the package in surprise. "But I wanted you to have the option. The dressmaker is a widow who came west after the war. She understands about scars. I thought you might be comfortable with her." Touched beyond words by his thoughtfulness, Nora opened the package to find a gown of soft blue silk the color of forget-me-nots with a high collar and long sleeves that would conceal the worst of her scars, while still being beautiful and fashionable. "It's perfect," she whispered, tears threatening again. "How did you know?" Owen smiled, pleased by her reaction. "I described you to her, not just your appearance, but who you are. She seemed to understand what would suit you." The day of the wedding dawned clear and mild, the sky a perfect New Mexico blue. Owen had left for town the previous evening, adhering to the tradition that the groom shouldn't see the bride before the ceremony. He had arranged for Mrs. Mendoza, the wife of a neighboring rancher, to help Nora prepare and to drive her into town. "You look beautiful, Querida," Mrs. Mendoza declared as she fastened the last button on Nora's gown. The older woman had been nothing but kind since her arrival, treating Nora's scars as matter-of-factly as Samuel had. "Owen is a lucky man." Nora studied her reflection in the mirror Owen had recently hung in the bedroom. The blue silk complemented her eyes, and the high collar framed her face flatteringly. Her hair, though still short, had grown enough to be styled simply, the light brown strands catching the sunlight from the window. The scars were still there, of course silvery pink against her pale skin, some raised and puckered, others smooth and shiny. But they no longer seemed like the most important thing about her appearance. Instead, she noticed the sparkle in her eyes, the healthy flush of her cheeks, the smile that came more naturally now than it had in months. "I'm the lucky one," she told Mrs. Mendoza, "to have found someone who sees me so clearly." The small church in Albuquerque was filled with more people than Nora had expected, neighbors from the surrounding ranches, shopkeepers with whom Owen did business, even Doc Reynolds, who had made the journey from Silver Creek upon receiving Owen's invitation. "I wouldn't have missed it," the doctor told Nora warmly when she expressed surprise at his presence. "Not every day I get to see a miracle." "A miracle," she repeated, confused. "Two people finding exactly what they need in each other," he smiled. "Yes, I'd call that a miracle." The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. Owen, handsome in a new suit, waited at the altar with an expression of such transparent joy that it brought tears to Nora's eyes. When she reached his side, he took her hands in his touch as steady and reassuring as it had been that first day in Silver Creek. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, his eyes never leaving hers. And in that moment, with this man looking at her as though she were the most precious thing he had ever beheld, Nora believed it. The minister spoke of love and commitment, of weathering life's storms together and cherishing its moments of sunshine. When it came time for the vows, Owen's voice rang out clear and strong, promising to love, honor, and cherish Nora for all the days of his life. When it was her turn, Nora's voice trembled slightly, but her words were no less sincere. "I, Nora Foster, take you, Owen Zachary, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for all the days of my life." The simple gold bands they exchanged were warm from being carried in Owen's pocket. As he slid the smaller one onto her finger, he added a promise not included in the traditional vows. "I will always see you, Nora, all of you. By the power vested in me," the minister proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Owen's kiss was gentle yet passionate, a perfect balance of reverence and desire that left Nora breathless and blushing when they finally broke apart to the sound of applause from their guests. The celebration that followed at the town's small hotel was more festive than either of them had anticipated. Owen's neighbors had contributed food and drink. Musicians appeared seemingly out of nowhere, and the party continued well into the evening. Through it all, Owen remained at Nora's side, his hand often finding hers, his eyes frequently seeking her face as if to reassure himself that she was really there, that this happiness was real. It was nearly midnight when they finally departed for the ranch, their home now in every sense of the word. As the wagon crested the rise that offered the first view of the property, Owen drew the horses to a halt. "Look," he said, pointing to the house below. Samuel, who had returned for the wedding, had lit lanterns along the path to the door and in every window, creating a warm, welcoming glow in the darkness. "It's beautiful," Nora breathed, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zachary," Owen said softly, kissing the top of her head. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through her. Not because it erased her past or covered her scars, but because it represented a future she had never dared to imagine. A future built on mutual respect and deep, abiding love. A future with this extraordinary man who had seen beyond her burns to the spirit that refused to be diminished. "Home," she repeated, the word a promise and a prayer. "Yes, I'm finally home." As Owen clicked to the horses and the wagon began to move again, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The fire that had nearly claimed her life had instead given her a new one richer and more meaningful than she could have ever anticipated. Her scars would always be with her, a map of the pain she had endured. But they had also led her here, to this man and this place where she was loved not despite her wounds, but with them as an integral part of who she had become. And that, Nora thought as Owen helped her down from the wagon and carried her across the threshold of their home, was the most beautiful miracle of all. 5 years later, the Zachary Ranch had flourished into one of the most prosperous in the territory. The small herd of cattle had grown substantially. The house had been expanded to include 2 additional bedrooms, and the property now boasted a thriving orchard and vegetable garden. But the most significant additions were the 2 small figures currently racing across the yard: Thomas, a sturdy 4-year-old with his father's blue eyes and determined chin, and Elizabeth, a precocious 2-year-old whose green eyes and gentle spirit were unmistakably her mother's. "Papa, Papa." Thomas called, spotting Owen returning from the north pasture. "Uncle Samuel says I can help with the new foal." Owen swung down from his horse, catching his son mid-run and tossing him into the air. "Does he now? And what does your mama say about that?" "Mama says I can watch but not touch until I'm bigger," Thomas reported dutifully, though the pout that accompanied this statement made it clear he found this restriction unreasonable. "Your mama's a wise woman," Owen agreed, setting the boy down and ruffling his hair. "Where is she?" "In the garden with Lizzie," Thomas replied, already distracted by the prospect of visiting the barn. "Can I go see the foal now, Papa, please?" "Go on," Owen laughed. "Just remember, watch, don't touch." As his son dashed toward the barn, Owen headed for the garden where he could see Nora kneeling in the dirt, Elizabeth beside her, both intent on the task of planting something in the freshly turned earth. The sight of them, Nora's head bent close to their daughter's, their hands working together in the soil, filled Owen with a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. This was what he had built with the woman who had come to him wrapped in flames and emerged with a spirit that burned even brighter. "What are you two plotting over here?" he called as he approached. Elizabeth looked up, her face breaking into a delighted smile. "Papa, we're planting flowers." "Forget-me-nots," Nora explained, rising to greet him. The years had softened some of her scars, though they were still visible silver lines against her fair skin, a patch of rougher texture along her jaw. But to Owen, they had become as familiar and beloved as every other aspect of her face. "Our special flower," he said, slipping an arm around her waist and pressing a kiss to her temple. "Good choice." "I thought so," she agreed, leaning into him. "How's the new fence coming? Finished just now. Samuel's bringing the herd down tomorrow." He glanced toward the barn where their son had disappeared. "I hear Thomas has designs on becoming a horse trainer." Nora laughed, the sound as free and joyous as it had been on their wedding day. "That boy changes his mind every week. Last Sunday he was determined to be a train conductor." "Well, he's got time to figure it out," Owen said, watching as Elizabeth carefully patted soil around the delicate seedlings. "They both do." That evening, after the children were tucked into bed and Samuel had retired to his cabin, Owen and Nora sat on the porch swing, enjoying the peaceful end to a productive day. The air was fragrant with spring blossoms, and the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue of the sky. "I had a letter from Doc Reynolds today," Nora mentioned, her head resting comfortably on Owen's shoulder. "He's retiring at the end of the year, wants to come visit us before he moves back east to live with his daughter." "He's always welcome," Owen replied. "We owe him a great deal." Nora nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that, about all the people who helped me after the fire. You, the doctor, Samuel, even Mrs. Mendoza with her practical kindness." She paused. "I was so focused on my own pain then, I don't think I fully appreciated what those acts of kindness meant." "You were fighting to survive," Owen reminded her gently. "That took all your strength." "Yes, but now," she shifted to look at him directly. "Now I have strength to spare. I've been thinking about offering to teach again, not at the school in town, but perhaps here at the ranch. There are families on the outlying homesteads whose children have no access to education. We could convert the old storage room into a classroom." Owen studied her face, noting the quiet determination in her eyes, the same determination that had carried her through pain and recovery to build this life they now shared. "You've given this some thought," he observed. "I have," she admitted. "At first, I worried that the children might be frightened by my appearance. But then I realized if they come here, if they get to know me as a person first and see that scars are just part of the story, not the whole story, maybe that's a lesson worth teaching alongside reading and arithmetic." Pride swelled in Owen's chest. This was the woman he had fallen in love with, brave enough to face her fears, compassionate enough to turn her own pain into purpose. "I think it's a wonderful idea," he told her sincerely. "And any child would be fortunate to learn from you not just about books, but about courage and resilience." Nora's smile was luminous in the gathering darkness. "I wouldn't have found either without you, you know. You gave me the space to heal, but you never treated me like I was broken." "You weren't," he said simply. Wounded, yes, in pain certainly, but never broken. He took her hand, running his thumb over the gold band that still gleamed on her finger. Do you remember what the minister said at our wedding, about weathering storms together? She nodded. I think of it often. How fortunate we are to have found each other before the worst of the storm hit. No, Owen corrected gently. I found you in the heart of the storm, literally in the flames, and you were fighting even then. He brought her hand to his lips. That's what I fell in love with, Nora. Not just your spirit, but your willingness to keep fighting even when the odds seemed impossible. Nora leaned forward to kiss him, her lips soft against his. We make a good team, don't we, Mr. Zachary? The best, Mrs. Zachary, he agreed, pulling her closer as the first stars of evening winked into life above their home, a home built not just of adobe and timber, but of love and understanding, of seeing beyond surfaces to the truth that lay beneath. And as they sat together in the gathering darkness, Nora reflected that perhaps this was the greatest healing of all, not the fading of scars or the return of physical strength, but the knowledge that she was truly seen and deeply loved, burns and all.